Season 4 is coming very, very soon. But before that, we wanted to share one of our favourites. From What Goes On Media, this is Coming Out Stories. It's a podcast about one of the most important conversations of your life. I'm Emma Goswell. Now, you may recall last summer, because it was the 50th anniversary of the partial decriminalisation of homosexuality, there was a show on the BBC called The People's History of LGBT Britain. There were two incredible women that were included in that, but their story is so incredible that an entire documentary, an entire film is being made about them. It's called Invisible Women. You're going to meet them now. Angela and Lucia.
Yes, I was born in a Magdalene home, and my grandmother came and took me away from there when I was about 3 or 4 years of age. And so I grew up in Ireland up until the year of 14 I was. And then she found out I was gay, and she kept threatening to put me away back in a home. And I think that, really upset me a lot. And she never stopped going on about it and to try and see if she could cure me or whatever. Now, none of the rest, she kept all this from the rest of the family. But in the end, I just thought, I got to get away from all this. So anyway, I decided to run away, as a lot of children did, I suppose, and they still do today from their homes.
So you knew you couldn't be gay in Ireland.
No.
In what year was this?
This was 1965, I believe, something like that. Anyway, I came to Manchester, and I found some family here, but I only stayed with those for relatives, that is. I stayed with those for a couple of months, and then I left again because of the same thing, basically. It was coming out, and I was afraid that the same thing might happen anyway. I thought the best thing to do is for me to just see if I can live on my own. I came down to Manchester because I'd heard about the gay clubs and pubs in Manchester, which they weren't called gay at the time. They were the queer places.
Oh, really?
And yeah. And so I went in there and I made some friends, to cut a long story short. And it was just dreadful, but I had nowhere to live. So I lived for quite a long time on the streets with other young gay people that had run away from home for the same reasons I did.
And you really found that there were other gays on the streets?
Oh, yes, there was a lot. Yes, there was a lot of gays and lesbians on the street, both boys and girls. And we used to kind of huddle together down near Victoria Station in under the viaducts in the night until we eventually, found somewhere, or some other gays would put us up every now and again if they could, And
I guess everyone felt like they really had nowhere to turn then in those days.
No, you had no place to turn. There was nothing at all for us then. Everyone was just in survival mode. And the main thing was keeping warm, not being too hungry, finding somewhere to wash yourself and be presentable walking into the union in the night so as you didn't, look like a tramp, basically.
What was your experience coming out in Ireland then that made you, think that it was better to live on the streets of Manchester?
Well, I didn't come out in Ireland. My brother found a letter from a girl in my school bag, and all hell broke loose in the house because they realised that I wasn't right in the head. That's the way they put it. And it was straight away after that my grandmother was threatening to put me away somewhere. And the idea of going back in a Magdalene home must have sat in my mind still, you know what I mean? It was a lunatic asylum in Belfast she was talking to me about.
And they actually talked about lobotomy as well to you, didn't they?
No, that happened in England because I was living on the streets of Manchester at the time. And what happened there was I stole a bicycle to try and get where I was getting. And someone caught me anyway. And to cut a long story short, the police arrested me. I ended up going to, what's the name of it, court. Mm. When I got up in the court, there was about 148 charges against me. I got 2 years probation. And the rest of the charges was dropped. The judge realised what was happening. And to cut another long story short, it was recommended that I had to go and see a psychiatrist because of the gay thing. And that they had a cure for it because they thought that I was off kilter and that I was suffering from depression, and it was all due to the fact that I was gay. I mean, I was only a kid at the time. I think I was coming up to maybe 15 or 16, I think. Anyway, I went to see the psychiatrist, and he was asking me, coming from a Catholic background and still believing in God and all that type of thing, the questions he was asking was absolutely awful. And I'd never heard of lobotomy, never heard of it. Mm. And he was sitting behind this big mahogany desk, and he was talking about all these experiments that he wanted to do and how I'd prepare for it all and everything else. When I realised that he was actually going to tamper with my brain and the dirty questions, I just I ran out of there.
Well, do you know, a lot of people listening might be too young to understand or know what a lobotomy is, so just explain what it is.
Well, lobotomy is where they kind of cut out a part of your brain that they think is the cause of your homosexuality, basically. And it leaves you like a cabbage or numb. You're never the same after it. It's just awful.
Sort of zombifies people, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. You become nothing.
OK. So, Angela, was your story similar coming out in the 1960s?
Well, Lucia and I had kind of similar origins in the sense that we were both illegitimate children. I could have been born in Ireland as well, but my mother chose to get on the boat and come to England to have me and a mother and baby home. Ah. And so, bizarrely, we had this sort of Irish thing in common. And so then I was adopted and raised as a strict Catholic. So all through my growing up, and as I got into my teens and realised I was attracted to girls, you know, I was sort of dealing with all the conflict of that through all my teens. I remember trying to confess it to a priest and him asking me all these weird questions about it all and stuff. And so when I got to the age of 19, that was just when the women's movement was starting and all that was coming up. And I think I read The Female Eunuch and things. And so it was all coming together where I just rejected my Catholic upbringing because I knew I couldn't be a lesbian. I mean, there was no even word gay at that time. And I knew the Union pub existed, but I was too frightened to go there because it was seen as, you know, pretty grim dive where, you know, God knows who hung out. So I never went there.
And I guess that's one of the original ones then on Canal Street in Manchester.
The Union pub. There was just the Union, the New York and the Rembrandt. That's all there was. There was no village as such. And it was pretty seedy. And at the time I was a student up the road and heard about gay liberation, and that somehow enabled me to come out through my politics, if you like. And there was, you know, I remember going in with my badge on, you know, GLF badge, and that was coming out for me to my other student friends.
And GLF stood for the Gay Liberation Front?
Gay Liberation Front, which had come from America, then come to London. And, you know, so that's where we were getting our ideas and information, really, was from the West Coast, I suppose, California and New York and places. So then I started to join organisations and things, and we were saying to ourselves, which is kind of funny now to think back, but we need to get out into the gay clubs and the gay scene and tell people, and almost a bit like the Salvation Army almost, you know, we've got the message and we want to get out there. So one night, me and another friend from Lancaster Uni went into what was the Picador Club on Shude Hill then, and it was one of the places where you had to knock on a door and a little wooden thing slid back, and a bloke was stood there going, "Hello, who are you?" You know, and we were let in because he could see we were lesbians, and I think we had little leaflets or something. And we was trying to talk to people and put our ideas over. Nobody was taking a great deal of notice. They just wanted to have a good time. And then suddenly the woman at the next table, who turned out to be Lucia, ears pricked up, and the next minute she's come over to us and saying things like, "I've been telling them this for years." And so we were delighted because we'd actually made a contact with someone.
So you two met in the Picador in 1970. What was that meeting like for you then, Lucia? Was it a bit of a revelation?
It was because my experience of the Union and all that at the time was one side of it was fantastic. We had the open mic night on a Saturday, which was brilliant. But we were like, there was a lot of unhappy people in there, like myself, that, you know, no homes, no jobs, couldn't, you know, thrown out of their homes and jobs for the reasons that we've just said. And there was a lot of suicides, young people killing themselves. There was a lot of people that ended up in prison and then came out of prison and that had a drug problem. You know, these were all gay people now, yeah? And so it became a right dive, but it was our dive, and you felt safe in there because the minute you stepped out of that union and onto the street, you had to run for your life between pubs and clubs because of all the queer bashers, they were called, and the police at that particular time.
Did that affect you?
Yes, it started to depress me, and it was a life that I didn't think, along with a lot of other young people like myself, that we could put up with this any longer. So we did used to start talking, but none of us knew what to do or how we could change anything, even change ourselves. We were a mess. And, you know, I had things going on in my head thinking all the time, you know, this has to change, this has to change, because we were losing too many young people through suicide. And a lot of kids went missing out of the union that we knew were gay. We never heard what happened to them or anything. And it just was starting to really get me down. I was at a really low ebb. So when I heard the conversation, at the table about Gay Liberation Front. I didn't know what liberation meant. I didn't know what a politician... I mean, I knew nothing about nothing. All I was surviving on the streets, gay, young and in the union. So when I heard Angela talking about all this gay liberation stuff, I asked her, could I just sit down and have a listen to what they're saying, because I thought it was really interesting.
And how did it change your life then, working for this movement, both of you?
I think we seemed to meet at just the right moment for each other, Emma, because although I had my politics and things like that, I didn't know any what I would call real lesbians. Lucia was almost the first one who wasn't like one of my fellow students and so on. So I was really drawn to her and all her life experience. And then she was, as she's described, pretty desperate really to get away from the lifestyle that she was in. And so shortly after we met and after we had the first meeting of the Gay Liberation Front, they wanted women to move into what was the Manchester Women's Centre, and we moved in there together, by which time we were a couple.
Yeah, so you fell in love as well.
We fell in love as well. And
Lucia's raising her eyebrows now.
She's never gotten over it, love.
Oh, no. Heart pumping.
You're not a couple anymore, let's point that out.
We were a couple for about 2 years, and then we carried on. So for her it was great because it was a way out of somewhere she wanted to get from, and for me it was a chance to really live a life I wanted to live as an out lesbian.
But for me it was just a little bit more than that, because for me it was all about changing things for everybody, you know, of my own class.
And what did you do then to try and change the lifestyle? So what work did the GLF do in the early 70s?
Well, the first thing was to have a meeting, and we just got getting everybody together really to talk and to express themselves and what was wrong with what was happening and what could we look forward to and our rights. I mean, of course, in those days, the idea of gay marriage was completely...
So what sort of things were you doing?
And ourselves, Emma, because Lucia was a bit trapped in the Butch and the Femme era, you know, where you had to be Arthur or Martha. And I was a hippie, so I could be a lesbian and have long hair and flowing outfits, and you know. But Lucia had to choose, really, hadn't you, to be one
either
or the
butch
other.
You either had to be butch or femme in those days.
Which did you opt for then, Lucia?
Well, I had to go for butch, love, because I looked ridiculous in a skirt. It's not that I was very mannish or anything. I just never felt like wearing high heels in a skirt. Yeah.
And he used to go around doing graffiti as well, is that right?
Well, we wanted to very much make our presence felt, both to ourselves and to everybody. So we'd do stuff like one night after the clubs had shut and we probably had a few drinks and that, we'd borrowed my mother's car and we had a big tin of yellow paint. There's 4 of us in the car and we sort of looking around trying to avoid the police, and we painted "Lesbians are here" on this bridge. Then we tipped the paint up in the car.
I bet your mum was thrilled.
Well, we had to clean it up.
Well, actually, we painted a lot of buildings up yellow with saying "Lesbians are everywhere," because what we wanted to do really was get noticed. This was the first strategy we had. Let's get everybody talking about lesbians, because nobody was taking any notice, so that somebody would come after us somewhere and we could get something started. So, you know, you light the spark and see what happens.
And we do a thing called happenings, where we'd go in a pub, but we went in the pub on Oxford Road. So this would be men and women, you know, we'd walk in and sit down, and we'd just look like an average couples, I suppose. And then at a given signal, one of us would get up and go and sit next to a woman or a man and put their arms around them and start giving them a kiss. And the whole pub would just go silent, and then we'd run before they could do anything to us. So that was called a happening in them days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Can you believe the Manchester today from the one where you met in 1970? Can you believe how much
That's
it's
a
changed?
funny thing you should ask me that, you know, because this is the truth now. I like to go down to Pride every year and just stand outside the Union pub, and I tell you, I cry with happiness, because I think, look at what has happened since the day we had that meeting in the Union in the late 60s. Look at what's happened since. It's wonderful. And this is why I would urge all gay people to get out there and enjoy their life and be the best that they can be.
Thanks so much to the amazing Lucia and Angela. And you can find out more about their extraordinary lives and support the documentary that's being made about them. Just go online and search for Invisible Women Kickstarter. It's really worth just even watching the trailer for that film. Thanks again to them. Please do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. We'd also love to hear from you on Twitter. You can find us there at Come Out Stories. I'm Emma Goswell, and Coming Out Stories is a What Goes On media production. Coming up next, you'll hear from Prince Manvendra. Yep, it's our first royal.
Yeah, I did have death threats also. My effigies were burnt in the fire, and there were protests in the whole city with people shouting slogans and saying I should be exiled from there, I should be boycotted socially because I brought shame and humiliation to the royal family.